All right. I think if I have your permission, I want to start because
Please.
absolutely 1800 hours, and let's begin. Namaskar. Welcome once again to the second session of PDNS 2021. Another interesting session is in the offing, I dare say. This session is devoted to external dimensions and future threats. Actually, just driving up to this place to start the second session, I was having a word with the United Services Institute, the director of the United Services Institute, and he was expressing regret that he is busy with some other commitment and therefore he won't be able to participate in this session. But while speaking about the subject that we have chosen, he mentioned something which actually I thought I must, it bears repetition. What he said is, he said, sir, do you know we can deal with any manner of threat, including cyber attacks. But three kinds of threats are the most dangerous. And he mentioned disasters, pandemics, and climate change. He said they are going to be ruinous because their magnitude is so massive. We haven't yet come to grips with it, but these three things could be absolutely devastating. So, frankly, I think we all are now thinking on the right lines and have chosen this as the theme for this year's PDNS, which I think is appropriate and timely. We live in a world today which is more interconnected, more interdependent, and fully networked than what it was, let's say, a decade back. And it's improving by leaps and bounds. We don't know the kind of technology that is just beyond the horizon. At the moment, it seems even beyond reach, but the galloping developments that are taking place in various fields, including electronics, is simply mind-boggling. So it's the right time now to start talking about external dimensions and future threats. And we have a very interesting, very capable panel to deal with this topic. Let me introduce the chairperson of this session, someone with an impeccable reputation and a very high reputation in his own service and outside his service, which is the Indian Foreign Service. Ambassador Sudhir Devare, who is the chairperson of this session. He is not only a founding member of Pune International Center, he is the former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, Ambassador to South Korea, Ukraine, and Indonesia. Also a former member, National Security Advisory Board, a high body, advisory body to the government of India. Former Director General, Indian Council of World Affairs, a very reputed think tank based in New Delhi. Visiting Senior Fellow, Institute of Southeastern Asian Studies in Singapore. Fellow, Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, Harvard University. And formerly Ram Sathe Chair, Professor Symbiosis, International University. Currently, he is the Chairman, Research Advisory Council of RIS. I'm told it's again a very highly acclaimed think tank on economic affairs, a leading think tank, which is on international economic issues, I would say, and Chairman, Society of Indian Ocean Studies, New Delhi. With that very formidable and impeccable credentials, may I now request Ambassador Devare to please start the proceedings. Thank you. You'll have to unmute yourself, Ambassador. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you very much, General Patnagar, for a very kind and generous introduction. I know we are good friends, and that's why you have all mentioned all these things. Dr. Mashirkar, President of the PIC, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Vice President, Mr. Abhay Vaidya, and our two panelists, Dr. S.R. Rao, whom I have known for a long time in RIS, and Colonel Inderjit Singh, an expert on cyber security. It's a great pleasure to be here this evening at the PDNS. I've had the good fortune of, I think, attending probably all the PDNSs since its inception. And I realized the value of PDNS not only in the city of Pune, but all across the country and including in the capital of New Delhi. Um, the topic which has been chosen this year after considerable deliberation, and I am aware of that, I think covers the current concerns and preoccupations of not only India, but the whole world. And therefore, when we thought of having this subject, this topic, national security preparedness, in an age of disasters and pandemics, I think it brings the dimension of time also. When you say it's an age, I think this was mentioned by General Patankar this morning, that this is a kind of a situation which we do not know when it is going to end. And therefore, we have to live with this, we have to deal with this situation. And when we talk of a situation like this, it has to be on a global level. And therefore, the question or the element of external dimension automatically comes into this, because this is a phenomenon. This is not restricted only to one country or a small region. It is really global. Today, we are faced with an unprecedented security threat, and that is of COVID-19. It has been raging for last 2 years, and it has been rated as one of the worst threats that mankind has faced in last 100 years. After the Spanish flu in the 1918, 1919, when hundreds of about 100 million people died. Fortunately, this time the number has not been that large, but nonetheless very high, and it's really a matter of deepest concern to all of us. Unfortunately, as I said, there is still no end in sight. In the past, ladies and gentlemen, security threats were of a different kind. I would say till the this millennium, we always thought of security threats in terms of foreign invasions or colonial occupation or exploitation and so on. 9/11, I think, in a way, changed the perception. There can be an intercontinental or transnational or a cross-border threat of that magnitude the world saw. I think it really shook the world. 2008, when we saw the subprime financial crisis, which actually happened in the US, but it had repercussions all over the world. And in fact, the effects of the 2008 financial crisis are felt even today. Interestingly, both had non-state actors. Previously, in most of the threats or such invasions or actions, states were involved. Even today, states are involved. But I think there are these are different kinds of threats which are now emanating, in which non-state actors are seen to be playing an important role. Now, pandemics is another such transcontinental threat. And from the place of its origin, its spread was extremely fast. They said in the past, in say 100 years ago in the Spanish flu, it took a year or two. But here, in a matter of a few weeks, the pandemic had spread from its place of origin, Wuhan, to Italy, and then other parts of Europe, and then US, South Asia, and India, and everywhere. So I think this is something, it's a new dimension. Globalization, which most of us have been beneficiaries, had also spread like this, perhaps not at the same speed at which this pandemics did. But today, that means when a phenomenon takes place, it doesn't take that long. I think it is because of the mobility, it is the power of technology, the new developments, whatever happens in one part of the world, and as you rightly said, General Patankar, in the highly interconnected world, I think today nothing is going to remain in one corner of the world. And I think this is a fact which we all have to take a very serious note of. And as we became more and more sort of isolated during the COVID time, this is something which we have to particularly keep note of. During the pandemic, as soon as it spread everywhere, countries started taking action based on their own sovereign policies, their systems, their own decision making. Whereas actually this was an intercontinental issue. It was not a domestic national issue. This had a much larger dimension. And this is a kind of a contradiction which happened because of perhaps peculiar circumstances. The pandemic had to be contained, people had to be isolated, lockdowns were essential. But as a result, you saw in parallel two developments. One, countries shutting themselves, from states shutting themselves, cities and districts shutting themselves. On the other hand, you had a situation where countries had to come together for the sake of medicines, vaccines, or various things. And therefore, how to bridge this gap between that isolationist tendencies and the need to have an intercontinental, international approach for dealing with this pandemic. The origin of this pandemic, so far there is still not full clarity about it, though the international community is pressing hard for a transparent probe so that causes of such horrendous pandemics can be contained in future, because we are all worried. We don't know how long this is going to continue, whether the similar pandemic will again recur. So we must go into the details of the cause so that it doesn't again happen. We all know pandemics do not recognize national boundaries. It has become, in fact, the COVID has become now a key foreign policy issue with most countries, with all over the world. And we see whether it is Quad or whether it is G20 or whether it is the bilateral meetings between the leaders, prime ministers meeting with President Biden and so on. COVID comes in the front place. This only shows that there is need for international cooperation and diplomacy. In fact, their importance cannot be overestimated. The manifestation of external dimensions is therefore in global understanding and recognition. And what has really been recognized, or it has been realized, the key importance of science and technology. I think this is perhaps an opportunity or a benefit of this kind of pandemic, that without the aid of science and technology, you cannot handle such global threats. And for that, countries must come together. Countries have to cooperate with each other. We were fortunate in India that we had Serum Institute of India producing perhaps one of the largest production centers in the world as far as vaccine is concerned. Our another firm, Bharat Biotech, went into indigenous production. Another company, Cadila, is doing. So many new companies are doing. Genova in Pune is doing. So very commendable work. But I think in production or science and research of vaccines, I think there is no substitute for international cooperation. We have to work together. We have to do research together. We have to share that. We got the AstraZeneca, under license. We could produce in India, and we were able to supply that to many countries besides our own requirements. I think the COVAX platform, which the WHO and Gavi have put together, to which many countries, including India, are contributing, is a very positive, very welcome development. India also has given vaccine to some 90 countries. I think, again, these are all, I think, positive sides of this pandemic, that how cooperation is gradually coming up. One thing we must always bear in mind, that there should not be and cannot be inequality as far as the distribution of vaccines is concerned. And therefore, vaccines have to be produced in larger quantities. If there is inequality, if there's lack of vaccine availability, as it is in Africa and many countries, vaccine availability is still very, very low. That kind of situation is very undesirable. Uh, there is also, talk of this vaccine certificates. Anything which is discriminatory, I think will create a lot of international problems. As it is, international travel, movement of persons, tourism are very badly affected. And if we continue on this, lines, this will lead to further isolation within the world, which is not desirable. About vaccine production, there is a move which India and South Africa have undertaken, namely calling the WTO for waiver of the vaccines which are essential and which can be produced by even developing countries like India or South Africa. I think a consensus in WTO is essential. Still, a few countries in Europe are opposed to such an idea of vaccine waiver. I think this needs to be overcome. I think without that, we will not be in a position to produce that kind of quantities which are required. I would say pandemic has ironically brought the world together. The nature of this threat, and in some ways it is similar to that of climate change. In both, there are non-state actors. Initially, human actions are involved, but once human actions are aside, then I think the nature itself tries to find the correction, and in that process causes enormous damage. So countries perhaps would need to subsume their sovereignty and cooperate in terms of production of vaccine or production sharing this or making available medical supplies, equipment, helping in healthcare systems. Because if you don't do that, the humanity will suffer on a scale that mankind may not be able to ever recover. I think this is something I really feel might happen. I think I've taken long to discuss this external dimensions. We have a very eminent expert and scholar as well as a speaker, Dr. S.R. Rao. He is the Vice President of Sri Balaji Vidyapeeth, Puducherry. He was formerly Senior Advisor to Government of India in Biotechnology and has been engaged in original scientific research on biotechnology for many, many years. And as I mentioned, we used to have the opportunity to work together in RIS some 15, 20 years ago on similar subjects. He is co-founder of the Global Alliance for Pandemic Preparedness and Response, which advances South-South and North-South cooperation. I think given the subject of this conference, we couldn't have had a more appropriate person to speak on this, mainly the Alliance for Preparedness and Response. He has directed Covaxin phase 3 clinical trials, which is currently, again, a very important subject under discussion in the country and with WHO. In my view, he is absolutely the right person who will enlighten and guide us on the subject of national security preparedness. So first, I think we'll discuss the external dimension of the pandemic, and then we'll go to cyber security. So I will introduce our speaker on cyber security after the presentation of Dr. S.R. Rao. So Dr. S.R. Rao, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this. Most of it has been very well articulated by Ambassador Devare. He is an expert in international relations. And also he was associated with many programs of early programs of bioweapon and others. Actually, what I will do is the topic is more or less similar, the points raised by the chairperson. And I was given a topic like need for diplomacy, international cooperation and collaboration in handling the pandemic. We have very respected people in the PDNS, Patankar and Dr. Mashelkar and many others. Thanks for choosing me to give this topic. Although with a lot of humility, I'm trying to attempt to say before you such seniors that I'll attempt my full-heartedly to justify the topic. In fact, as we know that pandemic is not new. Pandemic has been coming. I'll give you a lot of scientific, introduction to what has been told by the chairperson to substantiate some of his points, and then go around the dilemma between domestic and international relationships in terms of where diplomacy plays a profound role, unlike in the past. So we usually say that populations, they died. But why was just when I was making this slide and seeing it again and again, it is not only that from plague during the BC to COVID, there have been pandemics, although many people do not recognize them because they are confined to some continents and not everywhere. COVID has been covering entire continent. But if you see the proportion to the population, number of deaths have been more in COVID-19. Spanish flu times, there was no great technology available. So we're trying to compare what is that we improved with technology between Spanish flu to COVID-19. Did we do a great job in preventing these pandemics? So that is a separate topic which is being dealt by one or two people in our group at RAS. And the point I want to make is that frequency of emerging infectious diseases has been increasing. Almost every 10 years, 5 years, you see this happening. And most of these pandemics are basically spillovers from domestic or wildlife animals. And we don't have a great research going on the spillovers from wildlife research in India, but we do have zoonotic disease accounting in the veterinary setup. The interface between veterinary medicine and the human medicine in India is largely missing. There's hardly any dialogue between them. If you see most of the zoonotic diseases in the university where I have two medical colleges, medical book does not have more than one paragraph about any of the zoonotic disease. Regular diseases have been talked more. So the point I want to make is zoonotic diseases, most of them finally turn up into humans and cause pandemics. Most of the pandemics which have come are basically because of naturally occurring spillovers from the animals. In fact, there was a discussion about COVID-19 that Mr. Devare made. But recently in Nature, there was a publication by Max Planck that they unequivocally proved that 99% of the COVID-19 vaccine was already traced in the bats near Vietnam and other borders. So the question of whether it is a natural or it is man-made is also being discussed at various length. But the point is, it is very difficult to distinguish between them, except they go to the very heavily into science sequencing every unit. But more important is, more than the natural threat, I'm more worried about the potential of new technologies, which is a hot topic in the S&T subcommittee of the Bioweapon Treaty, where I also participate every year. 3D printing, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, advanced robotics, advanced materials, autonomous transport, genomics particularly, including gene editing, and also genetic engineering. All these technologies are coming together as a multidisciplinary approach. It will make our life easier to prepare any type of organism or a threat. So now, I'll not go into each of these technologies, but I will tell you one thing, that it is not difficult nowadays to construct life. Researchers have synthesized chromosome from Baker yeast, and now today a lot of viruses have been synthesized. What you do is you have a sequence information, and go to all other processes to produce a virus, which is also a DNA or RNA. And such type of thing can be done at a very cheaper rate. For example, $100,000 from the archival samples of smallpox, the Canadian researchers could make it alive. Bringing back an extinct virus that is related to smallpox is a pretty inflammatory situation, and state and non-state actors who are into these type of businesses can also exploit it. Now, the potential of these technologies is so huge that you can recreate known pathogenic viruses, making biochemical pathway to change virulence and aggressiveness, bacteria more resistant to the antibiotics of all types. Even you can interfere with the gut microbiome, gut microbiology, and lung microbiology over a period of time by introducing certain other organisms in the food and the medicine. So these are infinite possibilities are there, and it is being discussed globally and very closely watched by the intelligence agencies. But what is more important for all of us is that most of these pandemics cause a great economic loss. It has been so exponential that from a small incidences in foot and mouth disease like these things, COVID-19 has crossed already $25 trillion. And H1N1, SARS, and then avian influenza, they did cost billions of dollars in the early days. And it doesn't just leave one particular sector. Primary and secondary sectors, manufacturing, tertiary structures, hospitality, tourism, take any sector. You have data now available and to justify what all happened to these sectors. The only sector which was most benefited was healthcare and pharmaceutical industry, that too because of the requirement to cure the people, to have a therapy to the people. So in these sectors, supply chains, translating technology to bench to bedside, medical regulations, trade, economy, international relations, and even in all countries, as the chairman was telling, irrespective of developing or LMICs, it has affected. And now let me switch to some of the basics, which of course many of you may be knowing. But to start the argument of diplomatic relations, the epidemic or endemic or pandemic are either regional or trans-regional or translational. So therefore, it is imperative that we have to have relations with neighbors, relations with the far neighbors, near neighbors. It is an imperative thing to have a collaboration. You can't escape because the disease can come over from borders from anywhere. Then you can see the burden of epidemics. This will give you my argument. There have been more than 1,300 events. You see the numbers. In many neighboring countries, you can reflect those numbers, and they cover about 172 countries. So either it is a small epidemic or it is a pandemic. There is that you can't just escape. So therefore, international relationship should be very cordial. But there are some intricacies in saying simply so. And the conventional S&T diplomacy is good, but what happens? I've been a party to many protocols of cooperation. We just list a lot of these areas. Practically speaking, today you don't need so much of just listing. You have to be very specific. Knowledge is the main. In fact, Dr. Mashelkar used to always argue long ago, it is a knowledge economy, knowledge basis is the diplomacy, or knowledge is the key, and which will determine the health security. Even many policies going on health diplomacy, inclusive of vaccine diplomacy. This picture shows, while all these discussions were going on, almost 10,000 projects by now, by 140 agents, funders in 136 countries have been funded. You will see 45,000 publications in just 2 years, never in the history, have been published just on one subject. I did take a chance to publish some excellent reviews of 4 of them with a good impact factor. I mean, there was so much so that scientists were interacting globally. That is basically knowledge interactions. But what happens is, irrespective of these, what we have seen, I think the chairman rightly pointed out, instead of thinking about the neighbors and transnational, the pandemic is such, you have to have a lot of restrictions. The map shows more or less all those blue places, dark blue ones. There are so many restrictions. India is included. And the second are the light blue people, and then the green and yellow people. So there was a, depending upon whether it's positive test or vaccination or no vaccination, travel restrictions were there. I just want to say yesterday's information, the CDC USA has allowed people to travel to USA if you have a Covaxin already been taken. And they say there's no clarity whether it is phase 3 participants in the clinical trial or with a certification. But things are getting eased out. Similarly, if you see medical supplies, I think the chairman did mention, I am only giving the evidence, that 11724 policy announcement took place across the globe from time to time to prevent, some of them are even shipment of vaccines. More than 1,000 medical goods and including 250 cross-border shipments of COVID vaccines have attracted these export restrictions. So instead of collaborating, pandemic also makes you compulsory to have your own domestic policies and domestic measures. This gets added up with the domestic politics, and domestic policies do have a profound influence on taking up the transboundary collaborations. There are very excellent papers coming out about the politics and policies at the interface between international cooperation. This diagram just I am showing you that a program like Make in India and then international collaboration, a program National Health Policy, if you see, there is hardly any mention of international collaboration. And in Parliament also, you debate always, when we require vaccine, why are exporting? All those discussions take place. So domestic policies, so therefore domestic priorities and measures have to be really defined. I'm just going a little bit more advanced in terms of suggesting that India should have a National Pandemic and Prevention and Mitigation Act by now. Because disaster, if you see the definition disaster in the Disaster Management Act, there is not a single word like disease or infection or biothreat. One place there is a biological, that's all. And disaster is different from pandemic. If you see Wikipedia or net anywhere, there are lots of discussions about disaster is different. Then there is an old Epidemiology Disease Act, which is also of no great use. So you need to have a separate act. And this act, okay. So this act should enable to have a national biodefense strategy. Unless we have our own strategy, this is a picture from a national biodefense strategy of US. Enable risk awareness, enclosure, ensure biodefense, enterprise, ensure biodefense, preparedness, rapidly respond, facilitate recovery and restoration. So we can of course articulate our own national biodefense policy under the new act. We should also have a special cadre of human resource. NDRF has been very successful. We have some model to follow. But here, when the pandemic comes, we don't know. But we can continuously train and monitor these people, just like UN forces. When the doctors are called, they are there. We can always do that thing. For that, every stakeholder involved in this pandemic should come together. Secondly, instead of creating new institutions, I think DG Saab, ICSR will agree with me. It will take cost and time. We should have to repurpose some of these institutions to have a centers of excellence, especially focused around knowledge generation, innovation, development, mitigation of pandemics. And more important is food is stored in this country in millions of tons. Why can't we store national stockpile of medicines, devices, N95, surgical masks at regional places so that they are available within 24 hours? A policy framework with the public-private partnership can also be there to replace the expiry drugs in case of national stockpiles, which is a very well known in Singapore and USA. Now let me shift to international cooperation. With those domestic measures, I mean, few of them, I have many others I didn't want to take you here. So international cooperation actually amplifies individual countries' efforts. Unless we have a priorities what to do, we cannot use the diplomacy to direct international collaboration to our end needs so that it satisfies the politics and policy. And these priorities have to be determined not by one single ministry. It is a domestically measures through inter-ministry and center-state consultations have to take place. Because it is a subcontinent, you have various requirements and problems and strategies in each place. Fine. Okay. So some of the things I came to know, I want to just propose. We have to revisit the classical protocols of science and technology. We have to accelerate globally coordinated mechanisms. And more important, as the chairman pointed out, joint development, technology transfer, validation of new generation technologies are important. While we are proud that we are a great innovation country, but you see, only inactivated vaccine we could make. All these vaccines are new platforms, RNA, DNA, vector. People are 331 vaccines, out of those 24 only technologies which we are using. Even the number 6 we are familiar, but we don't have a great laboratories with the platforms. They are doing R&D, but we don't recognize translating this R&D. So there is a need for collaboration globally to at least acquire these technologies. I will also tell you that some expert in the past, whenever I used to be in the department to start one of these platforms 5 years ago, he always said these subunit vaccines, they are called, they will not work, don't attempt. So therefore, there is also a different type of wisdom that is required instead of concluding or judgmental. Then you can see why I'm saying that even in 2026, the prediction is more than 80% of them will be mRNA-based vaccines. Now this platform is so successful, they are using for HIV and other also diseases. So therefore, technology acquisition immediately is important for the country. Then we can't just collaborate with anybody you like. This is a Bloomberg's Innovation Index. We are 60th in the rank in that. I mean, some people argue whether it is true or not. But what I am saying is first concentrate on most innovative countries in terms of collaboration rather than going around here and there. As of the LMICs, developing countries, neighbors, we can always help once we have the capacity. And in a nutshell, 50% of the trick in preventing pandemics, understanding future pandemics lies in technology. These are a list of innovative areas. The slide, I tried to put it in a very complicated way. This is my own creation. Cyber security is one of them. I think I'm happy that it is being included, being talked next week. Rapid threat discovery, digital surveillance is very important. So continued surveillance is very important. As has been pointed out, the Northeast is a very potential area where Nipah virus and then the African swine fever, many of them have entered. So we can't just keep quiet. We have to build the capacity of the neighboring countries, if they don't have one, and use our diplomacy to monitor what labs they have, what type of pathogens they are working, and what type of pathogens they have in the country, and how they are being handling them. So this is all very important. And then there is also need for sharing. One of the biggest problems in COVID-19, a lesson learned is data sharing is very difficult because there is no commonness or measurement methodologies. We have to have this particular thing. Then of course, monetary and trade policy supply chains are very important in the policy cooperation. The data shows interregional cooperation has been very excellent compared to cooperation with the far-off countries. You can see world map showing zoonotic pathogens. So most of these green areas, there is a low diversity. Wherever meat-eating places are there, the high diversity of pathogens are there. And they are not very far away from us. So therefore, a surveillance has to be done in collaboration with all these people. It's a very sensitive subject. Diplomacy can only play a major role. Or you have to have a barter system to give and take, or build capacity in the neighboring countries like we used to do in Indonesia and many other countries. I think that's the only way to solve this surveillance issue. The other thing is monetary and trade and policy supplies. If you see, by 2003, think tanks predict most of the green transactions, their highest transactions of beyond $18 billion will be concentrated around our region only. So therefore, we have to concentrate on our own Asian region first, and before going to reach other countries in terms of policy, supply, trade policy, supply chains, etc. So I think recently our Prime Minister participated in the ASEAN meeting, and there was a very positive vibe in discussing these issues of innovation, surveillance, etc. This is data. Data has become a very complicated in pandemics. The generation, the international genomic surveillance, and then analytic modeling like artificial intelligence and others, and then to support so many supply chains. So it's a complicated diagram. I am just showing you that data sharing is very important for many problems to be solved in pandemic preparedness and surveillance. Then promote track to bilateral, regional, and multilateral dialogues. See, I was one of the persons who convened 5 of the Indo-US biosecurity dialogues. I was fortunate to go to, along with Rakesh Sood, Ambassador Rakesh Sood. He was also retired, but we used to involve him to go to Pentagon and also White House to learn their systems and all that. So track 2 dialogue is very important. Then you can convert into track 1 based on the inputs. I feel the track 2 is more important nowadays in pandemics rather than track 2. Track 1. Track 1 can be articulated later. Bilateral joint tabletop exercises have to be done. In fact, one of the meetings, what we did is the John Hopkins was exactly simulating the COVID-19 situation. Please go to the website and put CLADX tabletop. When you listen to the whole story of 3 hours, you will be surprised that has anybody predicted about COVID-19, because it was done in 2018. Such type of simulation can be done. Then you should have collaboration with global organizations and NGOs. These are different table. That is called a CLADX exercise, where me and Guleria from AM's director, I took all of this delegation, and Mr. Rakesh Sood was also there, ambassador. So very, it's a very thrilling exercise to simulate a pandemic in advance. Then these are various topics on which you have tabletop exercises. Why I'm showing this one is, when you can do military exercises, why not we do these joint exercises with people having capacity and knowledge to ourselves equipped, and thinking that we are great will not serve in pandemics. We have to open up our minds, yet have our own domestic policies and strategies. Then finally, multilateral organization, Gavi has been told, CEPI have been told. Most of them are influenced by private players, sponsors. So what we did along with the RIS and many other like-minded people in the world, this pandemic, for pandemic point of view, we made a global alliance for pandemic preparedness and response. I am proud to say that I was one of them who had a long brainstorming session with several people who are known to me to launch this one finally. We had a global meetings, we have now African meeting going on, and we have several initiatives under this, including tabletop exercises for public and community, etc. So finally, to end my talk, I just got this thought. I changed the slide, the last moment, it is not there with you. You see, it is like a pandemic is not a one person's game. It is like a car, I compare with the car. Politician is driving, and diplomats are sitting next to him in any international collaboration. And you have a technologists and private sector on the back seat. They will be murmuring, oh, yes, oh, you do like this, like that. And on the back, you have a media and non-governmental organizations. The thrill of it is that the policy is like a clutch. Brake is strategy, politics is accelerator. I think chairman was telling one point today that, whether COVID is from natural or lab escape or is it somebody synthesized it? And this you can go on playing with China. So press the accelerator as much as you can. So put them under control. But if you go exceed, they may also react. Then put the strategy gear, strategy brake, and then you just go step by step. But it's all driven by policy, which has clutch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grades. Now I think somebody has 6 also. So therefore, it is a managing pandemics demand multi-dimensional, multi-stakeholder collaboration, requires multidisciplinary knowledge. So knowledge diplomacy for health security. Thanks for patient hearing, and thanks to all for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rao. It has been a very rich and enlightening presentation, really, indeed. And I think you put that very succinctly in that last slide, in which you showed a car and described this whole thing as a multi-dimensional exercise. Indeed, it is. Highlighting the role and importance of the knowledge diplomacy, which is really at the root of this whole crisis today. You first listed some of the restrictions which are witnessed with be it international travel, medical supplies, or export restrictions, in even our domestic approach, domestic policies and priorities and so on, and then came out with very positive and constructive ideas relating to, for example, how NDMA lacks reference to biosecurity, and how that needs to be brought in. For that, we probably need a new act. Then, like food security, we should also be concerned with strategic national stockpile of medicines. There should be a national bio-defense strategy. Then we talked about technology acquisition in countries which are most innovative. And finally, I think you referred to the need for track 2 dialogues, the kind of dialogue which you conducted with the US. I think all these require a coordinating approach. And if I may venture to make a suggestion, General Patankar and Dr. Mashelkar, I think we could make a recommendation at this dialogue, at this PDNS, to the Ministry of External Affairs, that please create a division in the ministry today. I think to study all these various dimensions of this. This is an exercise. It cannot be just left to 1 or 2 meetings of this kind. It has to be a continuous and systematic study and exercise. We have to prepare ourselves, and that can be only done with government, as he said, politician or government running it, with diplomats sitting, technologists sitting, and so it will have to be a very systematic approach. And I think that would require, government decision at the highest level, that we create a mechanism in the government, be it in MEA, be it in some other ministry, but I think MEA and Science and Technology Ministry or Biotechnology Ministry, these will be the suitable organizations who can steer this. So thank you very much, Dr. Rao. I think we all would need to study it and find, number of applications from what you conveyed to us this evening. Other topic today is equally important, namely cyber security. Actually, the whole concept of cyberspace, this is so abstract, and its development in the last, say, 30, 40 years, it is so mind-boggling that most of us are laymen, cannot really fully fathom the the intricacies, the complexities of cyberspace. And when you find cyberspace also becomes a victim of attacks, of cyber crime, for variety of reasons, maybe some national interest, some business interest, some just criminal interest, God knows what. It causes tremendous concern, because today's world is almost entirely dependent on cyberspace. I mean, right from the time we get up to we go to bed, I think every activity is today more or less associated or controlled by semiconductors, electronics, cyber matters. And mobile telephony is becoming now, I think, virtually the instrumentation of human life. So, in that situation, if you are confronted with cyber um, insecurity or cyber crime, how do you deal with this? And the consequences sometimes can be huge, because I read somewhere that country like Estonia, small country, but country completely was paralyzed by cyber attacks a few years. Today in the Indian Express, I see a news item which says some nations may turn hackers for hire. And I was reading this and I just could not fully understand. But I mean, this whole cyberspace can be manipulated for any particular reason or interest. So how do we deal with this? What are the implications of that? Are there any means to control it? Because um, even in cyber security, the role a non-state actor can play, or mostly non-state actors, can be really huge, and it could be undetectable, perhaps, and can also have the capacity or the potential to pose tremendous threat and harm. So this is something which needs to be monitored all the time. The surveillance of all our systems, it becomes a very big responsibility, because we are full of today cyber systems, and their security, whether there are any standard practices, whether there are any protocols, whether we have enough personnel to control that, monitor that, I am really not aware. But to deal with this subject, we are really today fortunate to have an expert on the subject of um, cyber security. He is Colonel Inderjit Singh. He is a renowned expert who has the experience of past 30 years on cyber security operations. He is currently the Chief Cyber Security Officer of Vara technology and is working on disruptive technologies in cyber security space for some time. He is regarded as a visionary, a subject matter expert, they call him, on the latest disruptive technology. So we are really indeed very happy and fortunate that we would like to know more about cybersecurity at this PDNS, and Pune also being one of the leading centers in software and computer technologies. I think your knowledge and advice will be very valuable. I believe you are based in Pune also, so you are probably aware of the interests the city has, and we are not talking only of city of Pune, we are talking nationally. So this is a subject of considerable national importance.
Right.
So over to you, Colonel Inderjit Singh.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Devare, and thank you, General Patankar, for having me here, and also the PDNS, all the guest gatherings, all the dignitaries who are there on the frame, and also who are joining as a listeners. So you very rightly brought it out that the cybersecurity has taken the forefront in last couple of years, yes, and more so because the hackers are very active, and last year has been kind of the most active, where we saw so many things happening. And the start of the COVID was where we were being hit by the COVID pandemic. We were also hit by the cybersecurity attacks, the cyber attacks, and they were really phenomenal attacks which we had. And the magnitude has gone up so high. I'll share those figures while I have the discussion. So that's really, a point of concern, and it's become a point of national discussion, the international discussion, and even the G7 meetings where, all the national heads are talking of these kind of things. So it's become a real point of concern now, and it's taken the forefront. So we will be discussing on the cybersecurity aspect. I'll also talk about the national security when it comes to the cyber part is there. I'll talk about the critical information infrastructure. So what are the future threats I'll try to cover? I will try and, give you a perspective of where we were, where we are, and what's the future which lies in the cybersecurity, altogether. So over a period of time, we have gone through the complete journey of cybersec. We started with the internet, and then, we are seeing lots of networks coming in. Now we are talking of the data centers, we talk of the clouds, we talk of data, and what even Dr. Rao was bringing out. It's all about, we are the data, which we call it the new oil, new diamond, new fuel. Everybody talks about that. And it's the hacker's favorite, right? So that's what all the hackers really want to talk of. So we have gone through the journey of the internet security, which we saw then became in around 2008, 2009, around network security. We got in lots of it. And now we have a combination of information security, cyber security, data security, you name a thing, it's all there, right? And the cyberspace has become really phenomenal, right? And name a thing, it's all cyber, whether it's cyber ethics to cyber insurance, cyberspace, cyber war, cyber attack, espionage, communication law, everywhere. In fact, the cyber has proliferated. Cyberbullying, cyber stalking. So it's the cyber is from a person, a small kid, to the organization, to the country, to the world. So it's really concerning everyone. So that is where we see so much of happening in the cyberspace as such. And the world of cyberspace has become very complex, and we have threats which are getting complex by the day, right? Personal attacks, your identity thefts. We talk of the nation state actors, non-nation state actors, cyber espionage. We talk of, the terrorism. And also in the cyberspace, we have a darknet, which is a new thing which happened only a couple of years back, 2004-5 onwards. That's making the life really complex. And the targets are, like I brought it out, it's a government, whether it's state, local, federal, your e-governments, your e-commerce, your aerospace, banking, healthcare, manufacturing, oil and gas, power grids. Just to give you an example here, last year's power grid attack in Mumbai was one of the cyber attacks, right? Those are the kind of things, and I'll be covering up more on that part of it. So your telecom networks, your retail networks, universities, even the colleges are not being left behind in the cyber attack. And there were ransomware attacks on some of the colleges, not in India, but in UK, US. One of the biggest chain of school was being ransomware, and then asked for the money to give their data back, right? And in this vicious circle, there's a third part. How do you really counter it? That's a bigger challenge what we have, and being a thought to it, whether creating a cyber workforce, your traffic monitoring, network monitoring, devices, you have a kind of terror financing monitorings which are there, cyber intelligence which are there, cyber threat huntings which are coming up. So a whole lot of new terminologies at the same time are taking place, right? So that is where we are in the situation now, right? But remember one thing, in this scenario, either we are being hacked or we are going to be hacked, either of them. So it's not that you'll get away with it. So that's a kind of a problem we have today. Just to give you a background more on that, and when we were in the 20th century, and that's 1995 to around 2010, we spoke of firewalls, we spoke of antivirus, we spoke of the physical security, and that was all about the speed of sound. It's okay, we were taking a protection against everything. Now, when we are talking of the era from 2010 to 2025, right? That's the 21st century. So we are talking more from adaptive networks, the self-organizing cyber tools. We talk of the AI/ML, right? We talk of the defending. And just remember, the situation is such in the times to come, it is AI versus AI. Earlier, we used to have a antivirus which you could protect your device, you could protect your laptop or a desktop, just putting it that. Now the situation has come, it's a AI-based cyber attack. So only thing which you can protect using another AI. So AI will write a self-healing code, self-organizing code, can actually, so it's a machine versus machine situation we're going to be landing into, right? And the advanced scenarios which have been disturbing today is the insider threats, which are pretty important and always happen, right? So that is never devoid of it. We have the 0 days. 0 day means it's really taken you back, right, with the cyber attack, and you're totally unprepared for it. Your nation state actors are really at the forefront today. That's what they launch at the APTs. That's called advanced persistent threats, right? And your traditional tools are primarily, so weak with this sudden attack that you really don't know what to do, how to overcome that. And believe you me, half of the networks are already compromised. And if you ask the security officer, is your network okay? He will say, it's my security is the best. That's the situation we are in. So we really need to think of those kind of security parameters, those kind of security tools which are there. Now, there's a thing called Internet of Things, IoTs. Those are the sensors, and you would have seen in the smart cities, there are so many sensors which are coming up. Everywhere we have the sensors, and at an average, we have around 6 to 7 sensors per person, maybe in mobile, in your house, everywhere. So there are going to be 75 billion devices of that nature which are going to come up. How are you going to protect them? Like your washing machine is sensor based, your oven is sensor based, your housing light is sensor based. If there's a cyber attack, how do we really protect them? There's a challenge, right? So having said so, what we are seeing is there is a hybrid cyber physical environment which is there. When I say the hybrid cyber physical means your physical component and the cyber component, there's an amalgamation, right? And all the hackers, they know how to exploit these cyber physical systems, right? And these cyber physical systems are primarily put in the critical information infrastructure. I'll be showing you what are the critical information infrastructure, right? And what lies ahead 25 years now, it's going to be a very precarious situation where we are going to think of having a business and government who should need, they should deploy AI ML security solutions to win the war against the cyber attacks. That's the situation we are in today. So the threat perspective is very important to understand. And, just to give you what's there in the slide, data breaches are the most, at the top of the threat scenario. And that's what you see. Most of the cyber attacks which happen, the hacker steals the data. Once he's stolen the data, he takes it to the darknet, right? And he sells it there. If he doesn't, if the company is not paying for that money, he tries to make a noise about it and sells it in peanuts. That's what they do, right? Then the attack vectors, how they're attacking them. And we see phishing. One important thing here, between you getting attacked by a cyber or a malware and you being safe is only one click. You'll get a very spear phishing, very interesting mail, which they will prompt you to click it. You will click it and the malware gets detonated into your laptop or a desktop. And it's, basically creates havoc, it encrypts the data and asks you for a ransomware. And it all starts with what? Just one click. And that happens through phishing. And there is an advancement of that. That's called the spear phishing. Spear phishing means you are being targeted. They do social engineering on you. They see all the websites which you're moving on in the social network. And then they create a kind of a message which you'll fall for. And malwares, ransomwares, exploit kits, they're all there as a attack vectors. And the adversary groups are where you have organized crime groups. And it's very interesting space because hackers are no more a single hacker or a black hat hacker or a white hat. They are organized hacker groups. They are running a P&L, profit and loss. When I say profit and loss, they have marketing team, they have the broker team, they have a development team, they have a negotiation team, they have the software server teams, they're affiliates, they are ransomware as a service team. So they are running a whole lot of business. It's not just a person who just come in and trying to hack your machines. And they have an objective. The objective is they try to, find out whether you have a cyber insurance. And I need to, if you are a company who can pay, I will put a ransomware attack on. Those are the cyber groups which are there, and there are plenty of them today. Most of them originate from, the CIS countries, Russia, China, North Korea, and why they do it, there's a reason behind it. Say for the one of the case in point, Russia, the North Korea has got sanctions. How do they run the economy? They run ransomware attacks. Ask the money in Bitcoins, okay, and then they sustain. Same goes with Iran. They have the sanctions. They launch attacks. Ask money in ransom and Bitcoins, and they're doing the business. Similarly, others. So there are nations which are acting on it. So nation states are also playing a major role when it comes to the adversary groups, and I will show how they are organized. And when it comes to overall as an organization, we fall apart. Our security systems really fall apart. We have all the wherewithal which we thought is perfect, very good, and it saved us for last couple of years. But now, the situation has changed. We talk of an anomaly-based system. Anomaly means that there are changes in the network. There are no more signatures. The antivirus is no more good to save you. Your firewall is no more good to save you, right? And there are, the huge landscape, the threat vector. When I say the threat vector, that means you have a cloud, you have mobility, you have AI, you have ML, you have, IoT devices, everything which is coming up. Industry 4.0. Those are the emerging technologies. When they work together, it's a hacker's paradise, because for you, you're going to falter on securing them. They have challenges. They have challenges of small, chip on which they can't have the encryption, can't have the proper security solutions in that. There's a misconfiguration, all the things happen. And there's a lack of security situation awareness. And when I told you earlier that there's a real security, we always say we are safe. So other thing which is maybe of real interest to everyone is the gap between you being hit by a ransomware or a malware and you identifying it. Your window of opportunity is only 10 minutes.
My God.
If you don't identify a malware within first 10 minutes of it getting, you getting attacked by that, it's going to go dormant. It's going to be there in your network. It will start, opening up a command and control. And other thing which I will add here is all the malwares, when they hit your network, they are not just a software code which comes to your machine. There is a person, human being, who practically, is operating that malware. And there's something called a command and control center. He's got a window and he's seeing everything which is happening in your machine, everything which is happening in your network, right? That is what they're able to grasp, and they kind of, can take out the data on their will and wish. So all the malwares which do come into your networks are a very difficult situation to handle. And they lie dormant. They find a firewall, they find that you're trying to have an antivirus, they'll sleep over it. They are polymorphic, they change their pattern, right? And when everything is quiet, they start acting again. They start working on that again. And most of the time, it may so happen that if you're not been able to find within first 10 minutes, you may end up only after 240 days average, you may try to find it out that there was some malware which was there. And that is what, if you take the example of Equifax and other hacks which happened, the malware was dormant for so many years, and thereafter they found it. So while I was telling you about that, ransomware has been in news every second, every minute, right? And whether it's your, IT company, whether it's your government GPS, right? Whether it's your exchange servers, whether it's a government, everywhere the ransomware has been, targeting it. And they have a reason for it. They are being after the money. They're being after the data, and they then ask you to pay in the Bitcoins, which is a kind of a pseudo-anonymous economy, a pseudo-anonymous currency, though it can be tracked, right? But it's very difficult to track it. So they use that kind of model to take the ransoms. So there are almost 4,000 plus ransomware attacks every day, and they're increasing. And what is more surprising is, while we are talking, every 11 seconds, there is a ransomware attack. Okay. And in 2020 itself, we had 20 billion worth of damages, which was caused by the ransomware attack. Okay. And average ransomware is around $234,000 per ransomware. It's really phenomenal amount. And it's a situation, it's getting worse, not getting, sorted out. So 3 major attacks which happened, and that's a real point of concern. And that's where the US government had to really intervene. One was the Colonial Pipeline, which happened. They had to shut down the complete East Coast supply of fuel in the month of May. Why? Because there was a ransomware attack. Though, there are 2 parts to any network. One is the OT network, that's operational technology, with the supply of pipelines. One is the IT network, where you have the computers. It damaged on the computer side, but then they stopped the complete pipeline, and they ended up paying almost $4.4 million. Similarly, the meat, supply company in North and South America, it was being hit by a ransomware attack. And then they ended up paying almost $11 million. And one more was Kaseya. It's a kind of an internet services provider company, which has it. And there were almost 1,500 companies which it was supplying the services to. All of them were being hit by a ransomware attack. And they were being asked to pay almost $70 million. We don't know whether they've been paid, but definitely it was there. So as a thumb rule, the US government has said nobody to pay the ransomware, right? They should own up whenever there's a ransomware attack. But, most of the companies don't know how to cope with it. They don't have the backup data, and they end up paying up. So there were a lot of security developments, cybersecurity development, which happened in US in particular. They came up with a complete executive order on the cybersecurity itself. There were thought process which are happening. There was a zero trust architecture which came up. They told all the organizations, Department of Defense, to go with that, to implement it immediately, right? And more so, when it was a G7 summit, Biden picked up the topic with Putin on the cybersecurity, and because most of the attacks gave an indication of being emerging from Russia and the CIS countries, this was a point of discussion majorly, because they felt that Russia is behind all these attacks. Right? So, having said so, now what is important now from a country's perspective as well at a national level? And I spoke about the critical information infrastructure, or the critical infrastructure. There are 16 critical infrastructure which have been identified all over. In India, we're looking for 6 sectors majorly, right? So whether it's energy sector, your health sector, IT sector, telecom sector, water and waste system sector, transportation sector, nuclear reactors, all those actually form part of the critical infrastructure. And all of them have to be secured, right? the challenge is that their security is paramount, because if we are, not securing them and there is a cyber attack which happens, it's kind of a cyber war. So what practically a country like China does, they plant APTs, advanced persistent threats, and say in power grid sector, and thereafter, they will play around with that. And like I told you, they put a malware or a APT, it lies dormant for a number of years, it's quiet, and they can activate it whenever they want. Same was the case with the nuclear power plant in India when it was being, there was a cyber attack by Lazarus, right? So that was the one. The Mumbai power grid was another one. And then we had an attack last year, yes, that was in J&K, the power grid was affected. So those are the kind of things which we are seeing. And what are the APT groups all about? These are the kind of the advanced persistent threat groups. We don't know, how they really work, but then these are being supported by these countries: China, France, North Korea, Iran, Russia, US, Pakistan. They're unknown in number. So there are almost 100 groups in number in total today. And they have a particular type of signatures. That's what we really come to know. And, they have been given a particular name. So for example, Panda is generally associated with all the China. So Hurricane Panda, Numbered Panda, right? So those are the kind of things. Lazarus is North Korea, right? Similarly, some of the names of Cozy Bear, which is more common to Russia. Iran, of course, they call it Clever Kitten, Flying Kitten, Magic Kitten. So these are the kind of, and why they are being put this name? Because they have the telltale signs. There's something called a techniques, and the procedures which all these APTs follow, and that is where we are able to identify them. In India, in particular, we have a challenge. We have the Pakistan, which is very active. They have a state-sponsored threats mailing targeting our defense embassies and the government of India, right? China, I told you, they're already targeting our power grids. There was a report by Recorded Future in the month of March where they said there are almost 10 power grid networks in India which have been infected by APT41 and 2 shipping ports. North Korea, of course, is more towards the money part of it, because they get into the banks or the other networks where they are able to steal the money. Russia is also part of this particular game. And this is the APT41, which I've been discussing, is really point of concern for country now. Whether it's our bank networks, whether it's the power grids, whether it's our other critical infrastructure, we have a challenge with these kind of APTs, because they are very difficult to be identified, difficult to be tracked, difficult to be traced if they are lying dormant in the networks. And this is the kind of attacks which can happen. Your power grids can go down, your power distributions can be affected by the cyber attacks, because they can control the SCADA system and they can bring it down. And in case this power grid goes down, this is a situation which we are going to be in. So like in Ukraine, generally they face this kind of situation because Russia, they implant APTs onto Ukraine and kind of put the pedal in the cold winter. They activate the APTs, the complete power goes off, they've been affected. And like Ambassador Devare also brought out, Estonia, the complete economy crashed in 2007, right? That is the kind of thing. And then in Iran, most talked about attack in the history today, and nobody knows till now how it really happened, was a Stuxnet attack, which was on the Iran nuclear power plant. Nobody knows whether it's the US, whether it's Israel, how it happened. And the cost of building up that malware was more than $1 million to $2 million. And it actually stopped the complete Iranian nuclear power plant project. So tomorrow's attacks are going to be worse than today. We are seeing ransomware, your system exploitation. We are seeing unintentional data loss, which is going to be there. The challenges are really plenty. So, and we know that there are going to be weaknesses which are going to be always exist, even in the defense in depth deployments, what we are thinking of. And understanding these weaknesses should be the motivation towards designing the security paradigm tomorrow. That's really very important. Otherwise, we always say that, our networks are secure. And you really need to understand the anatomy of, the cyber attack, how it really works, right? And while I say so, the ransomware attack goes through different stages. This is how the malware actually works. And this is what I was trying to tell you. You will get a mail, you will click on it, there'll be a macro which will get activated. It will install the malware. It will take control of yours. It will start moving laterally into the network. It will start taking all the data. It will steal the data. It will encrypt the data in your network, take the clean data along with it, and ask for the ransom. That is the thing which we are seeing today. So how do we really secure these kind of things? So there is something called a MITRE attack framework, which is being done, funded by United States. And this is where they try to understand how a hacker really works or criminals really work, and what should be the steps which you should follow to secure at each level. Because earlier time used to say cybersecurity means antivirus, firewall, that's it, you're done. But what at each level, how do you really secure each one of them? That's the most important part which we have to look into. And the MITRE attack framework talks of three things. One is the tactics, how the hacker is using the tactics, they understand it. That is why when I was telling you about the APT, the advanced persistent threat, what are the tactics by them? What are the techniques which are being used by them? And what are the procedures? So we really identify all these three things to, find out what the hacker is all about, what they're doing. So it's important, know the enemy. That's where the MITRE attack framework, tells you, know the enemy, know thyself, right? That's how we really work. And the situation today is we are piloting with a broken compass, right? And that is where is very important that we have failure of today's security paradigm are predicted on false belief that, what we were detecting is the key to success. And we thought that all our firewalls, antivirus, IDS, IPS was secure, right? And then too, we seeing all the attacks which are happening. That's a real point of concern. Why they are happening? So there's an evolution of the malware which has taken place. And while I told you, AI versus AI, so all the hackers are primarily getting onto the machine learning based tools. Very difficult to detect. That's why we talk of a 0-day attack. We talk of, fileless malwares which are coming up, cryptocurrency malwares which are there, living off the land malwares which are there. So they're all getting complex day by day, right? And how do they really attack you? They may come either through your email attachments, your browsers, your social engineering. That's what we were talking of, that your social network, whatever you're putting, your mobile device which you have in hand, that's a kind of a device where I can put the malware into it and it will affect you, right? So having said so, the phishing attacks are the most important of the preferred, ransomware delivery model. Other thing everybody talks of all over the world, all companies, in fact, they say that a 0-day attack, that means this is kind of you're taken aback by that attack. It's being reduced only to hours after the initial discovery of that. Unfortunately, any malware which comes into your network, it can stay almost up to 9.5 years, right? And just to give you one of the cases, I generally use a malware for testing purpose that I took it from a GitHub. 2009 is the vintage. Even today, when I put it to test, most of the antivirus which are there, they are not able to do it. So that is the kind of situation which we are all there in today. So that's a myth when we say talk of the security. And all the security books, all the security reports which are there, everyone says, we are going to secure you. The advancement of the detection techniques are really very good, but the challenges are otherwise. We are still having cyber attacks. They are increasing, new malwares on the increase. So it's kind of a cat and a mouse race. And tomorrow's attacks will be asymmetric and they are all unconventional in nature. So while we are talking, we are in cyber war. Why? Because all your critical information infrastructure are under threat. So it's a kind of situation we cannot let it down. And there is one theory for, when we analyze the cybersecurity, is that it's called the Benstein failure approach, where it says that, we can expect a system to fail without notice or indication. And how do we ensure our critical information in this kind of situation? It can lead to a failure anywhere as per this particular Benstein perspective, and we don't know where the failure is going to happen. And that's how the attacks of tomorrow are going to be. Earlier time, we used to say, okay, systems, the applications, users, which can lead to failure, and we were very comfortable with. Then, this was all about the yesterday years. Then it evolved that systems were, the lower part of the networks were being targeted. Your laptops or the desktops were being targeted. System calls were targeted. Then it came to your operating system getting targeted. Your firmware, your kernels were being targeted. And thereafter, entire system is getting compromised. So we are in a situation, I don't know where this attack is going to come up. It may even emerge from your chip, which is there in your device, right? So that's the kind of situation we are in. But we should never forget that the end user is the most important, where the hackers really target today. And that is where the expert target people. And this is what is the focus. And the complexity is so much that we have IoT, and IoTs could be the future attack platforms. That's the situation we are going to be, because we have smart lighting, smart logistics, smart water, smart building, everything is there. Your medical devices are susceptible to the cyber attack, right? Very important. All your cardiac pacemakers, that in a hospital where you're being treated, you may find somebody a cyber attack which has happened, and suddenly you are, things are not working, right? So that is the kind of situation we are in. Your insulin pump may get affected, okay? And most of the hospitals, though hackers say that we will not avoid, attacking cyber attack on a hospital, but they do so. We had a cyber attack in a US hospital. They asked for $17,000. Last year in Czech, there was a surgery which was on, and the cyber attack happened, the ransomware attack happened. Then in Germany, there was a cyber attack happened, and a person died in OT itself. So medical devices are the next cyber attack platform where it can happen. Your driverless cars, we are talking about the driverless car, and you just think you're cruising at 100 kilometers an hour, and suddenly it's got totally blocked. It's frozen. What do you do? And that cyber attacks is a reality today, right? And it can happen anytime. And very interestingly, F-35 is the most advanced aircraft, but it has got the most number of sensors on board. So it's a flying computer, basically. All your supply chain, all your missiles, everything are being controlled using the sensors, the control systems. It's the hacker's favorite of flying F-35. So, and same goes with commercial aircrafts. So this is the situation we are in. So scenario 2022, we are seeing an integrated security with the IoT, right? Scenario 2025 is going to be adaptive security, and that's the transition to global real-time AI and machine learning, which I was talking, AI versus AI. And scenario 2040 is all going to be the neural security, right? It's going to be enterprise-wide deployment of real AI-based cyber defenses. Coming on to some bit of it on the Indian perspective, we have been doing quite a bit on the cybersecurity aspect of it. We are expecting national cybersecurity policy, which is due anytime now, right? Because the last cybersecurity policy was 2013. It had some challenges, but definitely we're looking in for the national cybersecurity policy, which will actually align the complete thing. And also the data privacy law. It was supposed to come in 2019. We're still trying to figure out the final shape of it, and that would likely to come up anytime. In addition, we have some of the very good organizations like NCIIPC for the critical infrastructure. Your NSCS is, of course, the National Cybersecurity Think Tank. Your Search India, your NatGrid, which is there, I4C to control the cyber crimes altogether, the CERT Power for the power grids, controlling all the power grids together, and also in due course of time, what is more needed is a cyber command, where you're really able to look into the cyber warfare. Since cyber is a military subject, cyber warfare is a military subject, but definitely there'll be another part which will look in for an influence command, where it looks into the social media part of it. There are other networks which are not into the cyber warfare ambit. So those are the kind of things which are being thought processed, and they are being going to be there in due course of time. Lots of them are on ground, really happening to safeguard India in the cyberspace. So with this, I have come to the end of the talk. So should you have any question, it will be a pleasure to take it on. Ambassador Devare, please.
Thank you very much, Colonel Inderjit Singh. I think it was simply mind-boggling and in a way frightening also. But you have really given us a great insight. I think most of us, at least I am not aware of all these things, and it has given us a new idea, completely new picture of this whole situation of cybersecurity and how complex, at the same time, how urgent and important it is in our daily life. I think what you said, that is, it has to be AI versus AI. So we are really going to be in a new cyber war, new technological warfare, where we have to use technology to counter efforts of other technology applications. That 10 minutes window is something, again, is not fully comprehensible, but I think the way this malware operates and how it can affect our data, etc., is something, again, beyond our imagination. Central critical infrastructure, India's own concerns, then this problem of APT 41, which you mentioned. And I think you put it very correctly when you said that is, we are trying to pilot with a broken compass, or having the Byzantine perspective. This will not do for the 21st century. And if the gravity of the cyber attacks has been so bad in last 2 years, particularly with countries which are under sanctions, encouraging it as it looks like, I think we are indeed in a situation where we require very close monitoring and all the time surveillance about our systems. So I think this is a very, very useful kind of presentation which you have made. I'm sure PIC will record this, as well as that of Dr. Rao, and both presentations, to my mind, enhance considerably our knowledge, our perspective, and will go a long way in PIC's projection of national security on the national scene. I think these are very valuable information and presentations that both of you have made today. I do not know whether there are any questions. Mr. Abhay Vaidya, would you be able to know whether there are any questions and who are they? Or just maybe we can take two, three questions. There won't be enough time.
Yes, General Patankar, would you like to raise any questions?
Okay, yeah.
Sir, you need to unmute.
So you're on mute, sir. You're on a mute, sir, General Patankar, sir.
I should go on mute? Yeah.
No, General Patankar, you need to unmute.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right. I think since we have already exceeded the time and we're pretty late in the day, I think we will choose to stop there, but not before. I'd like to request our president, Dr. Mashilkar, to say a few words. I'm sure, particularly the exhaustive presentation by Dr. Rao, and later on the linkage with the cyber field. I think that would have raised a lot of interesting issues with the persona of Dr. Mashilkar. And I think we'd certainly like to hear your views on it, sir, before we decide to close.
Well, I must say I've been absolutely spellbound listening to both these fantastic presentations. What a day we have had today. And as Ambassador Devare rightly said, it is also frightening. You know, I think creating public awareness about this is going to be most critical. We are all innocent. I mean, when Ambassador Devare says that he's innocent about it, or when people of that level say they are innocent about it, I am really innocent. So therefore, my greatest concern is creating sort of public awareness. In the morning also, we talked about the importance of public awareness. Now also it is becoming very, very clear, because everybody has a device in hand now. 1.35 billion people now have access, you know. And therefore, when particularly what Inderjit said with regard to, let's say, even the medical devices, you know, cochlear implants and sort of other devices, that means the threat perception is still not sort of understood. I was very also happy to hear Dr. S.R. Rao's presentation. I interacted with him and learned from him while I was in Delhi as a DGCSR. Dr. Rao, your analogy with car was absolutely fantastic. But you talked about drivers. There are no drivers now, driverless cars. So I was hoping to discuss with you who is going to drive the driverless cars, and where is the clutch, and who is going to sort of control. But it's a fantastic analogy. I absolutely loved it, and particularly the positioning that you gave of the politician versus the businessman versus the technology people like me, and finally the media. So all in all, I think this has been an extraordinary day in capital letters. So we are very, very grateful to you for your sort of presentations, participation, and enlightening us. I think the day begins now, in a sense, thinking about it. We are not closing our doors. We have just opened our doors. That's what I would say. Thank you. Grateful to you.
In closing, let me take a few minutes, because on the one hand, we have the expertise of the presenters. Also, in our own establishment, we have people like Dr. Mashilkar, who can, you know, explain a few things to us which we lesser mortals didn't quite understand. But the point is, I'm now sort of bringing it to real life, and feel that, you know, the people who heard the two presentations this evening are not going to get much of sleep tonight, I can say. You know, with the kind of, you know, every time you pick up something, you feel that there is some kind of an enemy behind it, you know, whether it's a biological thing that is going to hit you, or whether it's going to be an electronic enemy who's going to hit you. So that's the one part. The second thing is, you know, we were all taken up by what happened in Galwan and what is likely to happen in the other areas of eastern Ladakh. But now I feel it's almost like an iceberg. We are looking only at the 1/8 of the thing which is visible. 7/8 is below the surface, which is likely to hit us even more, and is far more lethal in scale and in devastation than what Galwan or anything else that we thought was the greater threat. And finally, a very basic thought hit me. You know, way back in the days of Cold War, a Russian pilot flew his MiG-21 to the west, and he sort of surrendered, and he defected to the US. So they, of course, took that MiG-21 apart to see what kind of technology the Russians were using. And they found that in the communication system, they were still using valves. And they said, oh my God, the Russians are so far behind us in terms of technology, where we have we have transited to transistors so
Understood.
many years back, and these guys are still using valves. Only then, a few months down the line, somebody put them wise. He said, listen, we are talking about a nuclear scenario in which all your systems which are operated by electronics are going to burn out. The things that will survive is valves. And therefore, don't think the Russians are fools to carry on with this kind of thing. So it sort of sets me thinking whether we need to go back to those, dial phones and things like that. After all, do we really need this kind of speed of transmission of information for everyday life? Yes, there are certain areas where we welcome that. Medical treatment, for instance, sitting here in India, you can consult a doctor who's in the United States or in Germany. But the fact is, this sets you thinking. And this is precisely the whole aim of this kind of an event, to make us all think what lies ahead, what is needed to be done. So I'm extremely grateful for this. And I think Dr. Mashilkar has one more thing to say.
One point. I'm so inspired by these presentations. Inderjit Singh, there is something interesting I wanted to tell you.
Right, sir.
There is this Indian Banks Association, and they have the technology awards. And I happen to be the chairman of the selection committee during 2015, 16, and 17 for 3 years. And one of the awards we started was, of course, for cybersecurity, because that was so critical. And I remember one of the, a very eminent speaker we had invited on to speak on cybersecurity. And we were having a tea, and there were only 3 or 4 people. And then he talked about a 12-year-old boy, who could break down any security system. He had demonstrated it to him. He said, that's what is going to happen. When you talk about state actors, Ambassador Devare, 12-year-old boy. So in a lighter vein, when I had to give my remarks in the evening, and when all these CEOs and the chairpersons of banks were there, Arundhati Bhattacharya from, for example, SBI, and Kocher was there, and so on and so forth. I told them maybe you should appoint this 12-year-old boy as chief cybersecurity officer. I think it's absolutely mind-boggling, the kind of thing that can happen in this particular space. So I'm yes, absolutely right, General Patankar. We are going to have sleepless nights. So good night.
Thank you once again. Absolutely tremendous presentations. Put us wise on what lies ahead, is going to make us think for a very long time to come, and it's going to make my job tough to actually glean the essence of your presentations and put them into some kind of a paper which will talk about further recommendations. So it's a huge challenge you've given me, to a non-technical guy like me, but fascinating nevertheless. I think we need to go more into it. And hopefully, as we come to grips with these kind of threats, which I said are far greater than the physical threats that we seem to keep looking at, and therefore we will accord it that kind of priority in days and months to come. Can't thank you enough. Thank you very much, Ambassador Devare, for conducting it so beautifully and setting the stage for these 2 experts to give us their views on this. Since morning, I must say, in fact, this is leading on beautifully. In the morning, we spoke about, risk reduction in a certain field. Now we need to carry that thought further to say risk reduction in this field that we talked about this evening. And tomorrow we are going to talk about role of science and technology. So it's a very logical, progression that this event is taking. And I'm so happy that it happened thanks to the elders in our organization, PIC, to have guided the course of this PDNS. I think we are going to, at the end of this event, going to be much richer in terms of understanding and knowledge. Tomorrow, we meet again for the next session at 10:30. I will be saying my piece again from 10:20 onwards. So hope to see you tomorrow morning. Try and get some sleep. Take a sleeping tablet if you have to. But thanks once again and good night. Jai Hind.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
sir. Bye-bye, sir. Bye.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Rao.
sir. Thank you very much.